players, by the time they reach the end of campaign, they've already brought 2-3 divines worth of gear, and by the time they end up on tier 16 maps, they have 100-150 divines. Hello and welcome to this review. Now, first off, this video is obviously a Ghazzytv Absolution. Now, the new players that play it, I define as players who either haven't played or have barely played the game. They do not run through the content and find everything easy and understand every part of the game. I have been informed by many people on my previous builds, like Pox's Righteous Fire, the Shadow build, and the Deadeye build, that new players actually find the content easy, understand all the resistance, all the gear, everything. By the time they reach the end of campaign, they've already brought 2-3 divines worth of gear, and by the time they end up on tier 16 maps, they have 100-150 divines. Your opinion down in the comments on what a new player is and what they're capable of doing before they become experienced players. On to the actual build. First off, it starts negatively because you're a witch. Witches are primarily more squishy because they have less life nodes in their section. Now, this doesn't mean the build is at fault, it's the general negativity of a witch. There's ways to get around it, but you start at a negative compared to some of the other builds. Now, the build doesn't actually get going until Act 3-4. By Act 4, you're running pretty much just upgrading gear. Act 3, you're teetering. Obviously it depends on level and random drops, but you do have to choose early on if you want to go life and armor or more damage for your minions first. I would recommend, if you're not sure, go life and armor and respec them later. Now, as far as the minion damage, you don't really feel it until you get level 25-30, when you got a lot of those damage nodes for the minions, and they're becoming tanky within themselves. Obviously your gear helps, you can use the vitality, different heralds, all that to improve their survivability, because they are quite weak to start with. And that's not the build, that's minions in general, they're just weak. Now, as far as recommendations, I would recommend this to pretty much anyone that plays the game style the way you've got to play it. So if you like getting a big weapon and smacking people in the faces, obviously this isn't the one. But if you like the sorceress type and minions and other games you've played with minions and that, you'll probably really enjoy this. This will get you from start, but technically this build isn't until Act 3-4. So Act 3-4 to endgame. Then it's up to you whether you respec, you invest in stuff, or you grind out trying to get the upgrades that make the build better if you're playing in a non-trade league. Now, as the content behind is showing, early on you are very dangerous if you're able to get the drops and you know your sockets and all that. Now, this particular playthrough, I got really unlucky with actually the sockets and links. I actually had to use some of the resources from the campaign. This campaign not used stash stuff. So this campaign's loot I had to use to try and get the gear. Obviously, that's just random. That's got nothing to do with anything but the random generation of gear. If you're lucky, by the time you reach 3, 4, you got your gear, you got your sockets, you're starting to drop a few 4 or 5 links. The vendors have 4 or 5 links for you. You got your movement speed early. Like, there's a lot of RNG to how quickly this build can take off. And you do want to look out for specific links, gem sockets, all that, because it's a massive help being able to plug in all the gems and just giving the minions power, because that's your build. If your minions are weak, you are weak. If your minions can tank the damage, you are strong. You're pretty much just there to make sure they exist, which is a interesting playstyle, but you, for the most part, face tank the enemy, bring them in, get the minions, get the Absolution Sentinels and everything, and then they do the rest. So you've got to be tanky enough to handle that first initial punch, and then the minions take over. Early boss fights is where this is actually hard, because most of the bosses have AoE, which wipe out your minions because they're not strong enough to stand on their own. The ads that come in and everything, you can regrow some, and the Absolution, you hit a unique or a rare and it does stuff, or you kill the normals. But yeah, early on the boss fighting's a little and then you get to a certain point where your minions are alive, your minions are doing a bunch of damage, all you're doing is getting out of the way of attacks, setting them up, and you're good to go. And by the end of it, depending on how you're leveled and what tree you take in what order, by about halfway to the end of the campaign, your minions are alive. You might have to raise a zombie or 2 for a boss. But yeah, it builds into it. It doesn't go strong and stay strong or get stronger. It starts fairly weak, but usable, and grows into its build, where it's quite strong and you can have tanky minions, and it's a lot of fun eventually. It's fun to lots of fun. It's a weird progression, but it's usable and levelable to really good. But yes, that is my opinion on this build. Do put your comments in below. Hit all those buttons, subscribe, like, and donate. It would mean a lot to me. And tell me what you think. But bye bye for another one. Bye bye.